What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to yet another edition of Trojan Dash, a long-awaited edition of Trojan Dash. I think this is our first one in 2.5 weeks, something like that. But, new year, same show, the content you all love about USC sports. We got a new look this time. I'm Nathan Ackerman, as always, a mainstay, a veteran on this show. But today, I am joined for our first basketball exclusive edition of Trojan Dash, which is going to be the format moving forward. Obviously, USC football season is over. We don't even want to talk about that program anyway right now. But today, I am joined by our basketball connoisseur, if that's how you pronounce that word, Anthony Gharib. Anthony, how are you doing today? Welcome onto the show.
I'm doing great, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. It's about time we start talking about some consistent programs, maybe. I don't know how to put that, but yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about some hoops.
Definitely. It is definitely about time we start talking about some programs where they're actually in season. And of course, I wouldn't jump the gun quite yet on the whole consistency thing because we saw yesterday that might not be the case, but we're going to get into that later on. We like to stay positive on this show, right? We like to start off on a positive note because that's what everybody needs to hear. So let's talk about USC's 6-game win streak. That just came to an end on Tuesday. They picked up, among other things, the first desert sweep since 1985, beating Arizona State and Arizona. They also picked up wins over UC Riverside, Utah, two other schools I am forgetting. Maybe you can help me out there. I don't know. I had this on the top of my head, but whatever. They won 6 games straight. That's always impressive no matter who it's against Division I competition. So I'm going to start with you, Anthony. What were the pros you saw from those 6 games? Obviously, it's a lot of games to take in. We haven't done this in a couple weeks. We're basically jumping in at the midway season point right now. But talk about those 6 games right there. What were the most positive signs you saw from those 6 wins?
Yeah, there were some main positive signs, and I think the 2 schools you missed were the Washington schools, Washington State and Washington.
Yeah, yes.
But the main pros are really the defense, and kind of emerge into a top 5 defense in the entire country, which is super impressive. And it's a testament to their length, the tallest Trojan team that we've seen. And the Enfield prior to the season was even talking about how he's excited to see the potential of how they can be on the floor. And we kind of saw it in that 6-game span where they were really outstanding on the defensive end. I was curious to see how they would work back Ethan Anderson. He was out for about a month and a half, and they did a good job. But really, it was their defense and the play of Evan Mobley, of course, and Taji really emerging as a consistent role player and a consistent scorer. But this is a squad that from their winning streak, you could tell they're going to hustle, they're going to crash the boards, and they're going to play tough defense and play energized. That's something that is going to be key in this conference. But that was a couple things that I really saw. And obviously, you look at the Mobley brothers, multiple games where they had double-doubles. That was something that was really great. But the main pros, the defense, coming out and being one of the best in the nation. And, of course, role players finding their role. Some like Drew Peterson, I forgot to mention. But those things were really the main things that I saw in terms of pros.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a comment in the chat from Clay Helton is worse than COVID, apparently, that says there are no pros. Andy Enfield is still the coach. And, we're going to get to the negativity later. I promise you, we love bringing the negativity on this show. But for the first 10 minutes of this, we're going to stick to the positives here. And there are some questions to be answered. There's some serious conversations that must be had, and we will certainly get to that. But I think you pretty much touched on it. It's the defense. This team is so long. I think it's like the only team, or it's the team in the country with the most number of guys that are like 6'7", 6'8", or above, and you really see that playing out. I mean, you watch a game, it kind of looks like there's 7-8 guys on the floor because they all have they're all like 6'10" with like 7'3" wingspans, and it's just impossible to score down low against this team. Obviously, you need to have the offense to sort of supplement the defense there. And I think on the offensive side, obviously the Mobley brothers have been awesome. Isaiah's improvement this year, just a quick side note, it's been phenomenal. Last year, he was fine, right? You kind of saw some potential in him, but he wasn't very coordinated. He was kind of throwing up some bad shots. He wasn't really finishing plays down low. But this year, like every single number that he's put up has just been a massive improvement. I think he's been an incredible asset to this team, especially when it lost the offensive, weapons that it lost to the NBA draft and to graduation and things like that. But aside from them, to me, it's the grad transfers, the redshirt senior transfers, these guys like Drew Peterson, Taj Edey, Isaiah White coming in and just making immediate impacts, especially with the three ball. I mean, you saw in the Washington State game, Taj Edey scores like 21, 22 points, and that was his career high. And that's just the kind of thing that, Drew Peterson was hot to start the year, and then he kind of cooled down a bit in the middle there, but he's really picked back up again too. And that was a thing that this team was really lacking last year, was the 3-point shot. And, you lose guys like Matthews, you lose guys like, Utomi, and you really get, you're already not a great 3-point shooting team. And then you lose the guys that are like the best at that for you. And they've really picked up some of those areas with the, redshirt senior grad transfers. So those have really been positive signs to me. And then you obviously talked about Ethan Anderson. Getting him back is just so crucial to this offense. He doesn't quite look 100% yet, and I think they're still trying to ease him back in. I didn't see how I didn't catch exactly how much he played in the Oregon State game, but I think in the Washington State game he only played like 10 minutes or something like that, which makes sense. He was out for a month and a half to not quite that long, a month to a month and a half with the back problem. So. But definitely good to see him back in this offense. They were sort of missing that. Taj sort of played that role, the point guard kind of role, but getting that playmaker guy who can just set up Evan Mobley, set up everybody else on the offense, even if he's not a dominant scoring threat himself, was just great to see. I think the other thing too was that this team was starting games hot, and they even did that against Oregon State, right? They come out of the gate and they're on fire, and it ended up getting to the point a few times where they built so big a lead that they needed pretty much every point, because it slowly withered away down the stretch, and they ended up winning by like 2 or 3. That happened several times. But the fact that they can come out of the gate that hot and build those leads that they need to build, I kind of said it's the opposite of the football team, because the football team, they're like, okay, we're going to go down big, but not quite big enough so we can come back and maybe pull it out by 1 or 2 points in the end. But the basketball team is like, we're going to start hot, and then we're going to slowly deteriorate. But the hot start's going to be big enough to barely hold on. I guess it's like whatever works. I don't think the thing about college hoops to me is that margin of victory really doesn't matter all that much, as opposed to on the gridiron, because you play so many games, things are going to even themselves out. There's not really such thing as a bad win, I guess is my point. So that's been good to see them, building those leads, even if they don't usually stand, but it's the win that counts. And then the Mobley brothers, of course, you can't say it enough. Evan Mobley needs to get the ball more than 15 times. Yes, that is definitely true. But we saw during the 6-game streak, he was getting touches down low. The guy can shoot threes. Like, he's pretty much, I've seen people comparing Kevin to KD in terms of what his offensive game is, and he's just the complete package. And I think, you keep him producing, and this team's pretty much unstoppable. But like I said, I was worried this year that it was going to be Evan Mobley and then nobody around him, really. And over those 6 games specifically, I saw guys around him that were helping him out, because that's what you need. You need a deep roster come playoff time. And they were doing a sort of 8-man rotation kind of thing, but all 8 guys were sort of chipping in. So I think they're going to need to see more of that moving forward.
Yeah, just to add just one more thing, in terms of the 6-game span, we saw the emergence of Chavez Goodwin as well. Coming off the bench. Yeah. When you look at the Mobleys, when they get out of the game, opposing teams are probably thinking, thank God, we don't have to deal with these guys. We're going to have to bring in Chavez Goodwin, who's a bruiser and he's tough, a hustler, and he's going to get into the paint and he's going to hit you and he's going to try to get offensive boards. And that's what really worked throughout in that 6-game span. He was coming in and he was picking up where the Mobleys were doing in the first couple minutes, getting offensive boards, and also causing fouls, and just causing a ruckus really under the paint. But another thing I also forgot to mention really was the emergence of Isaiah White. His play has been outstanding so far. He's been extremely consistent, really, on the defensive end. And his offensive game, he still needs a little bit more work. He's a little bit raw, but he's still a great contributor and someone who can bring more energy and hustle in the lineup. So those are really the 2 things that I kind of wanted to bring up.
Yeah, and I think you touched on those two words that I was just thinking of: energy and hustle. And those are things that, he's obviously not going to start games when you have the forwards and the big guys that this USC team has, but he's the kind of guy where, like I said, when that lead starts to wither away with 15 minutes left in the second half, you put him in and it's just boom, all of a sudden he's flying around, he's making plays on the offensive end, on the defensive end too. It's both those guys. It's Taj Edie. I mean, they're all this. That's the thing that I think this team has more than last year's teams. It has the energy and it has those guys that can come off the bench and just be that spark. And I think that this team often finds itself in situations where they need that spark. And I think that, like you said, those guys have been able to provide that. And I think it's really been an invaluable aspect to this team. But of course, this team is not perfect. And as much as we can dream of USC being this world-beating dominant team that can pretty much beat any team in the nation, I think Tuesday gave us a sort of reality check, hence the title of this episode here. They, like I said, they started off hot. They went up 8-0, and then from there it was pretty much downhill. They were down, I think, 8 or 10 points at some points in the second half. They ended up climbing back late, but ultimately it was not enough to overcome that sort of I guess pretty much all of the first half and like half of the second half slump, which is like pretty much the entire game. So that's like not great. They ended up losing that one 58-56. And I'm going to leave this to you. We've talked about all the things that went right in the 6-game win streak. How did it all come crashing to a halt yesterday?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to lie. Yesterday was a tough loss. Kind of had to reconvene and control myself after. It was a little bit setting, of course, the performance, but I think where it really came down to was just a scoring drought. In the first half, they went 3 to 4 minutes multiple times without a field goal, which is just unheard of. And you're not going to win a game if you're not scoring. It's just common sense. So that was really what went wrong. I think they got to figure out ways to find easy baskets. And Clay Helton is worse than COVID said it about Evan Mobley getting 15 touches, getting more than that. We'll get into that later, but it was more of just a scoring drought. They weren't able to find a bucket, and just really it fell apart from there. And a lot of, I don't want to talk about the referees, but in my opinion, there were some interesting calls. I thought the last play, I thought Evan Mobley was fouled. I thought there should have been some free throws there. They missed a lot of open shots. 0 for 9 from the three-point line in the first half is really not going to do a lot of work for you. So that was something that really hurt them. But in terms of actually, I found one positive that I really want to touch upon, and that was in the second half. Ethan Anderson controlling the ball and having Taj Edie and Drew Peterson on the floor with the two Mobleys. That really accelerated their offense and really made them more powerful and got them easier shots. Obviously, we're not going to see that early on because you're still getting eased in, but that was something that I really like to see. But the main thing that really went wrong was too many scoring droughts. That's what happens with an Enfield team. We've seen this pattern before. It happened against Colorado. They couldn't find the bucket in the last 5 minutes. They just lost the game. And it happened against UConn. I think it was in November, December. I'm not sure the specific date. They couldn't find the basket, and they lose the game. So that's exactly what went wrong. I think that their defense at times making a lot of mistakes. The first half, they tied it up in the second, but, like you said, it was kind of too late at that point. They get out to an easy or quick start, 8-0. They get outscored. I think it was almost like 20 points the rest of the half. So, it was just too little, too late. The scoring droughts hurt them, and they gotta find a way, and we'll talk about it later, but they got to find a way to kind of get over that and get a win, a much-needed win against Oregon State to continue the streak.
Yeah, let's talk about Evan Mobley for a sec, because he came in as I've seen him ranked at different numbers overall in the top 50, top 100 prospect rankings, whatever. I've never seen him anywhere lower than 3. I've seen him at 1, I've seen him at 2, I've seen him at 3, and mock drafts have him pretty much consistently going number 2. I haven't seen him lower than that either, right? He is unquestionably USC's best player. He's probably the best player that's come through this program in a long time. Do you know how many field goal attempts he got against Oregon State?
I'm guessing 6. 8, yeah.
8. 8 field goal attempts. That's not enough. He needs to be taking... He needs to get the ball more than 15 times a game, but he needs to be taking at least 15 shots per game, preferably more. And that's another thing that just really frustrated me about that game was the shot selection. It was terrible. I mean, you talked about them missing open looks, but they missed smothered looks and, looks that they shouldn't have even been taking in the first place. You talked about all the missed threes, but it seemed like the first half and pretty much the entire game, there was just no spacing on the offensive end whatsoever. They were getting clamped. They were all getting bunched up down low, and they couldn't find a way to create space, whether that's with dribble moves, whether that's with passing, whether that's with cutting, whether that's with offensive scheme, anything. They were finding no way to make any space, and because of that, they were throwing up shots when they were getting double teamed. They were taking fadeaways. They were just not good. They were, step back fadeaway threes with like 25 seconds left on the shot clock. It's just like, what are you doing? There was no flow, no rhythm to the offense whatsoever. And then there were 5 or 6 seconds left in the game on the play where you said Evan got fouled. I must confess, I wasn't watching for the foul specifically, but there did seem like there was a lot of contact there. So that was definitely a call that I'll need to examine. But the ball ended up going out to Drew Peterson, who nobody that game had really been hot from the three-point line, but he was starting to find his groove a little bit in the second half and later in that game, and he was a big part of the reason why they were able to come back from, 8, 10, 12 points, whatever it ended up being. And he was a couple feet behind the three-point line with like 6 seconds left, and he was wide open. And I get that the tendency in that moment right there is to want to take the two, want to take the easy look to tie that game up. But that's not, it's over and they win. And I think in that spot, you need to be worrying less about the number of points that the shot might get you and more about what's the best shot that we can possibly take. And that was one of USC's best right there. And he ended up taking one where he like dribbled, but there was a guy on him and it ended up being like a floating running kind of three. And it was just not the best look. So again, I don't want to pin this entirely. Like this game was not Drew Peterson's fault at all. Like I said, he was a big part of the reason why they were even competing late in that game. But it was just, to me, the fact that you're taking bad shots, passing up open ones. It's just there needs to be some smarter shot selection there. And again, a theme that we've been seeing all season, but hasn't really hurt them that much except for a couple games in terms of the win column was free throws. You got to make your free throws. I mean, 10 of 18 is just not going to cut it. There were times when like I was watching that game and I was happy with guys making 1 out of 2. And that's just not where you need to be as a team, especially when you're not hitting threes. And I get that you're not always going to have the 3 ball going every single night, but 10 of 18 is not going to get the job done if you're not making, any jump shots. You're shooting, I don't know what their field goal percentage was on the game, but it couldn't have been more than like 35-40%. Probably should have checked that before I went on the air, huh? But point is, they were missing shots all game. It was adding to the scoring droughts. And then when you have the looks at the free throw line that they got a few of them. I mean, if you take those 8 misses and you give them 3 of them, you're still 13 of 18, or you give them 4 of them, you're 13-14 of 18, which isn't like jaw-droppingly great, and you win that game, right, by 1 or 2 points. So it was just, I'm not terribly concerned about this game from a shooting perspective because you're not always going to have cold nights like that. Like it is not going to be that bad. But when you couple that with a team that can't shoot free throws, they're like last in the Pac-12 there. And as soon as they have a cold night, it's like any team can beat them. And Oregon State, as it says right there, was 2-3 in the Pac-12 before beating the Trojans. And that's going to happen when you can't shoot free throws and you're not hitting your threes.
Yeah, especially when you play a team in Oregon State who's leading the Pac-12 in free throw shooting. You can't give up easy fouls and go to the line. Like Evan Mobley and a couple other players that I can't really think of it on top of my head, but they had some looks where they were getting fouled and then missing both free throws. And it's just that those are easy points that could get them the win. And, it's something that has to be worked on, and we'll see what happens next in terms of the free throw shooting.
Yeah, and I mean, you have guys on this team that can make free throws. Peterson can make them. Edie can make them. Isaiah Mobley's improved. Evan Mobley's improved. Chavez Goodwin is not a great free throw shooter. Like, that's just going to happen. But, it's just on those nights when everybody's off, from the fields. You need to have some guys that are going to be able to step up there. And this is a thing that has been plaguing this team all season. Like I said, it hadn't really hurt them in the win column up to this point. But it's the kind of thing where if you're playing Pac-12 tournament games, you're playing March Madness games, which is, obviously it shouldn't even be like what this team is judged on at this point, because they should be in the tournament. Like, they would have to seriously collapse in order to miss the tournament at this point, I think. But you're going to be playing close games, and you're going to be playing close, tight games against teams that know what they're doing, and they're going to do the hack a shack, whatever. If they're down the stretch, they know that you can't shoot free throws. They're going to capitalize on that. So that's something that this team needs to be. I don't know. They need to be shooting 100 free throws each day in practice, and then hopefully that problem solves itself. But again, I'm not terribly worried about the 3-point woes, because they're not going to have nights like Tuesday night every night. But when you couple that with the worst free throw shooting team in the Pac-12, it's a recipe for disaster. And we are getting into some of the bigger picture problems with this team, because we talked a lot about the Oregon State game. But some of the issues from that game are some of the things that I think you and I are both worried about for the rest of the season, specifically from a 3-point perspective. So it's clear that the potential for this team is high, right? We saw it on the 6-game win streak. We saw it the rest of the season. We know that this team can win games. They have a talented roster, maybe more talented than last year, despite the guys that they lost. But it's even in the games that they've won, it hasn't perfectly clicked yet, right? They haven't played a full 40 minutes up to their potential like we think that they can do. So what do you think it is for this team, this talented roster, I think, that you think this team really needs to I don't know, key in on to take the next step and compete for a Pac-12 title, compete for a deep run in March Madness, I guess?
Yeah, I think the main thing is they got to get Evan Mobley more involved. I know we said it in the beginning, but your best players got to take the shots. He can't have just eight shot attempts. Just won't work. And you got to get him more easy baskets, maybe coming off pin downs and box to box screens to get him easy looks, going into hook shots. I think the main thing that they need to focus on going forward is, and I think maybe this is mainly Andy Enfield, how is he going to implement Ethan Anderson in with this lineup, because it's going to take some people out of the rotation and maybe cut down on their minutes, because like you mentioned, they were running an 8-man rotation with I think Chavez Goodwin, Max Agbampolo, and maybe Noel Bauman sometimes would come in. They got to crack that down and try to figure out, all right, who are the 8 guys that are really going to step up for us. I think the main thing they got to figure out is, how can we get Evan Mobley more buckets? Because if you look at Oscar Da Silva from Stanford, who they're going to be playing tomorrow, he's averaging roughly 20 points on 60% shooting. I mean, that's no joke. So, and you look at Evan Mobley, Evan Mobley is only averaging 16 points, and he's not taking as many shots as he should. So you got to get him more involved. I think he's the guy that can carry you into deep play in March. That's what's going to be the key. And another thing that we really didn't talk about was they got to get Drew Peterson. Drew Peterson has been involved throughout, but he's going to get more buckets now with Ethan Anderson in, because Ethan Anderson is going to be looking for those shooters. And a lost name that no one really talks about, Noah Bauman. I think that he's going to be key, because he's an excellent shooter. He's just not finding his rhythm. He's not getting enough minutes. He's not getting his shot down. So that could be something that we can look forward to see. Or maybe he's going to come up clutch in a month or two and we need him. But in my opinion, the next steps, you got to find ways to get Evan Mobley more involved. I mean, he's the number 2 player in the draft, or the mock draft, for a reason. So you got to get him more buckets and more touches so we could get more wins and hopefully play deeper into the tournament.
Yeah, and I want to say what's up to Lauren Matisse. Thank you for joining the show. Thank you for hopping in the chat. She said, point percentage is going to go down when Evan Mobley gets drafted, and I think that's a very safe bet. I mean, this is the year for this team, right? I don't think that, we've seen some of the guys that they've been able to land in the last couple of years, like Isaiah Mobley, Evan Mobley, but I don't think that this, I mean, Big O, of course, but I don't think that this is like all of a sudden a recruiting powerhouse now, right? I think, the family tree there is kind of obvious. So it's definitely, this is going to be the season when this team makes a deep run. This isn't a program that's built for one and done guys. So we'll need to see, whether they can actually find success in the postseason when they're forced to play in this like one and done superstar kind of environment this year. But yeah, this is probably going to be the best team we see for a while on the USC side. So let's hope they can put it all together. But I think one of the other things that you kind of hinted at is the offense just, there needs to be more rhythm and more flow. I mean, we see it even in the games that they won before the Oregon State game. We saw it especially in that game too, obviously. It just seems still out of sync. I mean, even with Ethan Anderson back, obviously they're still trying to work him in to a more, dense minutes workload, for lack of a better term, I guess. But even in the points where he was in the game, I mean, the offense looked better. It looked better for sure, but it wasn't quite up to where it needs to be. And part of the problem that I saw was you had guys that were just like playing out of their roles. Like you had Drew Peterson like trying to post guys up and trying to, take like fadeaways. And then you had Isaiah Mobley shooting threes. And like his shot has gotten a lot better, of course, but he's not a 3-point shooting guy. He's a beast down low, and he needs to, continue to thrive down there. Once you take him out of his game, he's a lot less effective on the scoring end from that range. So I think once you get Anderson back to a more full-time load, you get sort of that offensive rhythm back, you get sort of that flow back, and you have, Evan Mobley posting guys up down low, kicking it out to Drew Peterson for a three. You have Isaiah doing the same thing, kicking it out to Taj Edey for a three. I mean, that's how this team's going to thrive. And I think the more we see of that, the more we see of guys just doing what they excel at, because there are guys that excel in their specific roles with this team. I think once we see more of guys sticking to that, we see more rhythm and flow on the offensive side. I think that the ceiling for this team is really quite high, but they need to put it all together, like I said, for a full 40 minutes of basketball. And that comes from not just the hot starts that I talked about, but from avoiding those sort of second half collapses and avoiding those mid first half scoring droughts, because again, you can get by with that against Washington State, against Washington, but when you're playing teams like UCLA, they're going to have to beat them once or twice if they want to compete for the Pac-12 title. You're playing teams in March Madness, you're going to need to play a full game. And once you have that sort of lapse right in there, it's all going to fall away. And then, the momentum's totally gone. And are they going to be able to bounce back from that? I don't know. So those are kind of the things that I think this team really needs to focus on. And the free throw shooting, especially, like that might be number one, because if they can shoot free throws, this team might be like, they might have one loss on the season. So if you can have that, you can have more flow on the offensive side, and you can play more consistent basketball. This team's going to be good. Yeah.
And one more quick thing on Isaiah Mobley. Bill Walton last night, who was commentating, this was probably one of the only good things he said last night outside of the Temecula Dirt and the Conference of Champion references. But he was talking about Isaiah Mobley needs to be more down low and kind of being more of a playmaker for his brother, because if you notice, he's playing more on the wing. That's not his natural position. He's got to go down low and try to create more opportunities for not only himself, but for the shooters and for Evan Mobley. So that's one thing that he needs to kind of figure out you got to figure out in the next couple games so they can hopefully bounce back and make a deep run for the title.
Yeah, and that's something that I think largely comes from the coaching side. You have some of the best players on this team are like freshmen, sophomores, and then most of the team are like seniors, grad transfers, redshirt seniors, but they're all coming from different places. And I think you've yet to see this team sort of fully gel and fully play as one cohesive unit. And I think when they can do that, like I said, I think the ceiling for this team is very high. But unfortunately, we are running low on time here, so that's going to do it for this edition of Trojan Dash. Thank you, Anthony, again for joining the show. Congratulations on your Trojan Dash debut. I remember mine back in the day. Come a long way since then, I guess. No, I'm totally kidding. So thank you again. It's a pleasure to have you on. Looking forward to more of that moving forward. As always, a reminder to follow us on all of our various social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter @Dash Sports TV. We also do some columns with Sports Pac-12. Anthony, I know you have one on the USC basketball team, so go check out our work with them. Check out our website @dashsports.tv. You will see our full shows, some clips from our shows. You can meet our awesome hosts. A lot of wonderful stuff happening on that dashsports.tv website. But again, follow us everywhere. Stay tuned for more Trojan Dash and more Dash Sports in general. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
You.